Day game versus night game versus online game versus social circle. Which type of game is best suited for you and what you're after? Now, everybody's going to have their preference on what style of game they prefer, mainly depending on your personality, the types of girls that you're after, whether you're just after getting laid or whether you're after getting girlfriends, your daily routine, and where you live. All those factors are going to play a part in which style of game is best suited for you and what you're after. And each one of these ways can succeed, but they all have their own pros and cons. But they're all viable ways of getting about success with women, whether that be dates, lays, or girlfriends, relationships. Okay, so first off, day game. Day game, for those who are unfamiliar with it, is basically hitting on girls during the day, at the gym, at the beach, on transit, at the grocery store, wherever you see women during the day and go and talk to them. You are doing day game, with the hopes of getting dates, lays, and girlfriends that way. So, what are the pros to day game? One of the biggest pros for day game is the variety of women that you meet. You're going to meet girls that are complete virgins. Yes, they are out there. And you're going to meet girls that are like escorts, essentially. And you're going to meet girls that are everything in between. It's a complete mixed bag. You never know what you're going to get when you approach random strangers that you meet during the day. From all walks of life, and they're all going to be different girls, completely different. So that's one of the big advantages of day game is you meet a variety of women of the entire population. Second, the competition is going to be very low, simply because there's not very many guys, not very many good-looking guys that are willing to risk rejection and talk to women during the day. So you will be one of the elite guys that actually does that. So the competition is going to be less, barely be any people that ever do this. And because of that, when you actually do get laid, you have a very high chance of being, retaining the girls that you meet. Because it's kind of, the whole situation plays out like a movie. In a girl's mind, she meets a random guy on the street, they date, she gets laid, and it's how that she meets her boyfriend. It's kind of like a Hollywood, that you would see in a movie. So yeah, it helps retain girls because it feels like it's fate or like they were meant to be. In a way, it's kind of true. You never know what you're going to get. And it's kind of random that way. Day game can be incredibly convenient and efficient, provided that you live in an area with lots of exposure to women. If you see a lot of women and they see you during the day, you're going to have a very high success rate with day game, just because your exposure rate is so high. The more women that see you, the higher your chance of success. Second or third, it's great for finding girlfriends. Like I said, the ability to retain girls is very high during the day game because the majority of girls in the general population are looking for relationships. And that's who you'll meet typically in day game scenario. What you see is what you get in day game. It's not like online dating where people can catfish with their pictures and look completely different. Or when you meet them during night game where it's super dark and you can't really tell what they look like completely. With day game, you know exactly how they dress. You know exactly what they look like. There's no surprises. Finally, the rejections are actually pretty polite in day game. Provided you are normal and guys striking up a normal conversation, girls are generally pretty nice, even when they're not interested. So you really won't have very many rude rejections. The girls will usually be really polite. So whether you get rejected or not, it tends to be a positive experience, either outcome. Lastly, it's easier to find girls that are alone. When you approach girls during the day on their commutes to work, on their way home from school, at the gym, at the grocery store, they're typically going to be alone. And that's a good thing, so their friends can't cock block them and prevent you from meeting them. And finally, the cons of day game. There's a couple, for sure. One is probably the biggest one. Why most guys will never do Daygame in their entire life is because of the approach anxiety that guys experience when they're forced to approach a woman during the day with no other help, with no other context. It's scary, so most guys will never do it. Which is why like the rewards for Daygame are so high, because not many guys are able to do it or will themselves to do it. Another like problem with Daygame is if you live in an environment with not very much exposure to women, you are going to struggle with Daygame simply because you don't see very many of them. So you're going to be constantly looking out for girls to approach when there's not very many of them. And the lower the exposure to women, the lower your odds of success. So yeah, if your typical routine has you barely seeing any attractive women, the odds of you having any success are really low. Lastly, there's a low ratio of sexual available women during the day. When you take people from the random population, the majority of women are not going to be sexually available. They're not going to be looking for a new man in their life. So there's no screening process to like weed the sexually available women in. It's a completely random, and most girls are not going to be looking for you, for what you're selling, because they already have their man situation figured out. They're not looking for a new dick in their life. So yeah, this is why Daygame kind of sucks that way. Alright, the next one up is night game, which basically means hitting on girls at the bar or at the club, usually when there's alcohol involved, and usually when you're trying to get laid that night. Alright, so what are the pros to night game? One of the biggest pros to night game is the higher ratio of sexually available women. See, there will be some girls that go to the club or go to the bar specifically to get laid. The same thing that you are. So yeah, there's going to be a higher ratio of these girls than night game or day game for sure. So yeah, this is one of the big pluses to night game environments. Second of all, it is probably one of the fastest ways to get laid, provided you meet a DTF girl at the bar. I mean, it can take like 5 minutes max, and you can be leaving with a girl back to your place. It's that quickly. When you mix alcohol involved and sexually available women, things happen really fast. So that's one of the big positives for night game. It can be very efficient provided you live close to the bar, a good bar and a good club where there's lots of like night game environments. And lastly, it can be a lot of fun with the right group of guys. It can be like, a social event as opposed to like just getting a laid event. Cons. There is a lot of cons to me in night game. One of the biggest cons of night game is how it's hugely dependent on your logistics, on how close you live to the bar or club. The closer you live, the better. The further away you live, the worse it is. I mean, try to get a girl back to your place when you live like 45 minutes or an hour away. What a nightmare. If you live within walking distance, like you've got yourself set up for good things to happen. But yeah, it's hugely dependent on your logistics, on where you live. So if you don't live close to these places, night game is probably not the best for you. Secondly, it's largely dependent on the venue. Some bars are going to have, like, for some reason, a lot of sexually available women. And then some bars or clubs will have not very many. They'll just come for attention or for drinks or just to, play around, not to actually get laid. So it really depends on the venue. Some venues are awesome. Some venues are terrible. So, and there's really no way of like knowing whether it's good or not before you go. Thirdly, one of the bad things about night game is there's low retention after you have sex, because a lot of girls aren't looking for a relationship from the guy that they met at the bar. It's just a kind of a one-time thing. So don't be surprised if some girl hits it and quits it with you on a night game scenario. One of the worst things about night game is the rude rejections that you will get when you mix a bunch of horny guys trying to hit up girls and you mix a ton of alcohol thrown in. You're going to be at the receiving end of some of the rudest rejections you can experience because the girls are drunk, they behave badly. So yeah, it can be shitty that way. Lastly, one of the worst things about night game is it usually costs money. Like think about cover charges or drinks or cabs, like transit prices. All that stuff adds up. So you're essentially paying money to hopefully find girls and get laid. To me, it just seems kind of dumb. I'd rather just go do like something cheaper where it doesn't cost me any money to meet girls that I want to meet. Some guys are going to absolutely love the night game environment, and these are the guys that should do night game. If you go to the bar and you find yourself like being like, man, I wish I was someplace else, then night game is not for you. Do like day game, do online game, do something else, because it's catered to guys that like that environment. They don't care whether they get laid or not, they'd still be going to the bar. So I'm not really one of them, despite having success in that environment. It really wasn't my cup of tea. You will experience more cock blocking in these environments. They're usually with their friends. The girls are usually with their friends. And usually the friends are rude because, yeah, there's alcohol involved and there's a lot of guys hitting on them. So they tend to be like, yeah, rude in order to like turn you off and get you out of there. Lastly, something I've noticed with a lot of guys that only do night game is they tend to have a bitter attitude towards women. Probably because they've been on the receiving end of a lot of shitty behavior because the girls are drunk, and it caters to that environment of girls that, you know, tend to be party type and they tend to drink a lot of alcohol as well. So they tend to view women that way, like all women are that way. All women go to the bar. All women get drunk. All women behave like assholes. But yeah, that's the type of environment that you experience if that's the only thing you do, is you only do night game. Alright, up next is online game, which is basically using Tinder, Bumble, Hinge in order to meet women, get laid, find girlfriends, the works. Okay, what are the pros of online game? First and foremost, it is the fastest way to sexual abundance. No doubt about it, hands down. The quickest way in order for you to have a very active sex life is to get your profile handled, and you will have a lot of sexual partners to choose from. Second most biggest pro of online dating is the convenience of it. You can be sitting on the toilet while hitting on chicks. I mean, it's totally passive. It's great that way. You can be sitting at home hitting on 100 chicks. You wouldn't. That would take you forever trying to do that at night game or day game. So yeah, you can funnel through a ton of women. You get more exposure than any other form of game, which is why it's the fastest way to sexual abundance, because you're exposed to more women, more than any other type of game. Great thing about online game is the rejection is minimal. You don't have to have any balls for online game. You're just going to have your message ignored or not get any matches or anything like that. That's the worst thing you'll experience on the online dating world. One of the great things about online dating is it's less dependent on where you live. I mean, it's still dependent on where you live, but it's not as important as day game, night game, and those things, because you can expand your search radius. So yeah, even if you live in the suburbs where the population density isn't too high, with online dating, your profile can get broadcasted to a ton of women, like hundreds, thousands of women around your area. So yeah, it's huge that way. It's not dependent on your daily routine either. If you work a sausage fest job and your hobbies are all sausage fests, With online dating, you can just fire up the app and you can get exposed to thousands of women. So yeah, no other game can do that. Lastly, it can be probably one of the most fast and efficient ways of getting laid, provided you have a top tier profile and you screen hard enough. Which is why, yeah, it's a good thing, provided you made the investment in a good profile. The cons of online dating. Probably one of the biggest ones is the amount of competition. Because it's so easy to do, so convenient, and doesn't require much of you, pretty much every dude within a 100-mile radius is going to be doing the same thing you're doing. So competition is crazy high. The amount of males on dating apps outnumber the females, sometimes like 10 to 1. So yeah, you're competing against a ton of guys for one female. Second bad thing about online dating is now pretty much all the dating apps are pay to win. Meaning, the more money you pay, the more girls that you are exposed to. And the more lays you get, the more dates you get, things like that. So before like Tinder had all this like paying model, you could be like not spend any money and still get laid like a champ. But as soon as they rolled out those like payment tiers, they limited the amount of exposure they got. So they made it so you had to pay to get exposure. This is why exposure is more important than anything else in the whole entire world in terms of getting laid. Girls have to see you in order to want you. And Tinder monetized that. All those dating apps have monetized exposure. So the more money you pay, the more girls see you. But that also means that if your profile sucks, it doesn't matter how much money you spend, no girl is going to pick you. Doesn't matter if you're exposed to thousands of women. If your profile is terrible, your success is going to be minimal. So yeah, if you have a decent profile, the top notch, the better. Like the better it is, the easier it will be to, get laid, obviously. But the less money you'll have to spend as well. One of the big cons about online dating is it requires you to take a lot of pictures of yourself. It's going to probably it's probably going to require you to take, a professional photo shoot. So it's what most guys are doing now that are actually getting laid. I remember way back in the day when Tinder first came out, I was one of the few guys that actually had professional pictures and I cleaned up. But now pretty much every guy is doing that. Everybody is like making a bigger effort. Like the competition's getting stiffer and stiffer. So yeah, you're going to have to max out your looks and max out your pictures. More importantly, max out your pictures. Like you can have a good looking guy, but if your pictures suck, you're not getting anywhere online. You have to be put in the work and get really good pictures. You should be able to look at your picture and say like, I look damn good in that picture. It shouldn't be like, yeah, I look pretty good. Like I look about average. Like, no, it's got to make you look amazing. So yeah, that's probably going to take some monetary investment, either in your time and taking a shitload of pictures, or paying someone to take pictures for you, a professional. So yeah, the good thing about that is once it's done, you're set, and you can basically sit at home and swipe all day and still get laid. So it's super convenient, super effective, provided you put in the time and the investment into your good profile. One of the biggest cons of online dating is the high flake rate. Because there's so much competition, and because you're just a pixel, like you're just pictures to this girl and text messages to this girl, you aren't really a person. So it's easy for girls to flake on you at that point, which is why I advise to only schedule dates within like 1 or 2 days. Otherwise, the chances of you getting lost in the shuffle and girls flaking on you is pretty high. Again, because the competition is so high, your retention rate will be low as well. Because, yeah, girls have tons of options, thousands of options to choose from. The chances are, even if you get laid, she's probably not going to be a girlfriend or a relationship, because she's got a lot of guys to choose from. I wouldn't recommend online dating to find a girlfriend simply because the ratios are all wrong. Because it's 10 guys to one girl, it means that like you have to work 10 times as hard just to get an equivalent girl to your like SMV, I guess you could say. But yeah, it's just a bad environment because the more the competition is, the lower your margin of profit, the lower your profit margin, essentially. Similar to night game, where guys that only do night game tend to view women as total and drunks and party animals. Guys that only do online dating tend to view women negatively in the light that it's impossible to like get a relationship with a girl. It's impossible to get a hot girl. It's impossible to do all these things because they're strictly in an environment that works against them. They're competing against 10 other guys for one girl. So they have this kind of, I don't know, like, they view women as like they have these millions of options when that's only in the online world where that's the case. So yeah, the guys that only do online dating tend to have a bitter outlook towards women. And the last thing bad about online dating is the catfishing. Girls will manipulate their pictures to look better than they actually are, and when they show up on the date, they don't look anything like their pictures. This is nothing new. It just takes a keen eye, an experienced eye to see, like you can kind of pick out when girls are hiding something on the pictures that they use and the angles that they use. So yeah, you will probably be on the receiving end of some catfishing until you develop a sense of experience and know what to look for. And last one is the social circle game. This is how normal guys get laid. They have a job or a hobby that puts them around women. And then it's easy for women to show interest in these guys because they're around them all the time. So as soon as these girls show interest, they ask them out and they start dating and away they go. That's how normal guys get laid. What are the pros to social circles? Is the rejection is minimal. Because girls can easily show interest in you because they see you throughout the day. It's easy for them to demonstrate their interest. And then it's just a matter of the guys asking them out. So yeah, there really is no, like, oh, I'm worried about being rejected. It's not the case because the girl gives plenty of cues that she's interested. It can be quite efficient provided the social circle is large enough. But most social circles are not very large, which is why it's a problem that I'll get into on the pros section. But it can be efficient provided you have a big social circle. Social circle is probably best for finding a girlfriend because usually it's in an environment with not a lot of males around and not a lot of competition. And you'll notice this whenever you meet a guy that has a hot girlfriend way hotter than him or a hot wife way hotter than him, they tend to meet in social circles where the women outnumber the men quite considerably. This is like why the profit margin is so much higher in social circle. And it is the best way to get laid and find a girlfriend in a small town. Yeah, that's just the way it is. The cons of social circle, and there's a lot of them. And one of the biggest things is the limited amount of women in the social circle. Think about any social circle that you know. You're going to have a limited amount of women. There's not new ones coming in like all the time. Whereas like online dating, night game, day game, you have unlimited essentially. Another huge problem with social circle game is you're completely dependent on your job, your hobby, your lifestyle in order to get laid. So what happens if you change hobbies? Or what happens if you change jobs? Suddenly your sexual abundance and your options are essentially zero. and you're left with nothing. So you're probably going to end up doing night game, day game, or online game at that point. So yeah, it's very limiting. Think about a bartender that upgrades to an engineer. He makes a man of himself and becomes an engineer. So he had an abundance of women available to him while he was a bartender. But as soon as he upgraded his career, all that abundance goes out the window, and he's left in scarcity and wondering, like, where can I find a woman? The last problem with social circle is the amount of time and energy required to build one up. Let's say you wanted to get a job as a bartender or waiter or a lifeguard. That puts them around a lot of attractive women. It's going to take time to get that job. Probably build up your experience before you're able to get it. Same thing if you wanted to join a dance class or a co-ed kickball team. In either of those scenarios, you're going to have to get good at that activity, because no girl wants to fuck the guy that's stomping over the girl's feet in dance class, or the guy that's costing the team runs on their kickball team. You're going to have to become the very best in your class or on your kickball team to have the pick of the girls in your social circle. So with that said, that's the final thing about social circle. Which type of game do you prefer? Which type of game caters towards you and your lifestyle? Alright guys, that's the video. Thanks for watching.